Hello, Photobooth World. This is Steven doing a little walkthrough for you on how to make a homebrew print server, slideshow box, music server, and whatever else you might want to throw at it if you're up to experiment. Right now, what you're watching is the boot up sequence of one of the boxes that I've already set up for this. And once it's fully booted and I've explained a few things, then we're going to go through the whole process of setting one of these up using the guide I've published online and the resources associated to that and the bits of software and things we'll be using along the way. I'm going to switch screens here. We're going to start off looking at the Diet Pie website, and down in the corner there you'll see the boot up continuing. And it's going to go into a slideshow. And that's all automatic, no extra input from me has happened to the Raspberry Pi. So while that's doing its thing, you get to watch a little slideshow. We're going to be using Diet Pi. It's a lightweight Linux distribution meant for the Raspberry Pi and other systems. So if we head to download, these are all of the boards that it supports. For the purposes of the guide right now, we're going to be using a Raspberry Pi 4. Any of these small board computers with onboard HDMI with HDMI audio, 3.5 millimeter audio out, onboard Wi-Fi should do the trick. I've tested this with a Raspberry Pi 2 with a USB Wi-Fi dongle all the way up to the Raspberry Pi 4 I'm using today, and my suggestion would be a Raspberry Pi 3B or 3B Plus or 4, as those have the onboard Wi-Fi HDMI audio outputs needed for this. So you go in, select your model, and hit download. I've already downloaded this. If you need more details on installing, you can view it on their site, but you will want to follow my guide because we only use steps 1 and 2 here in a little bit from there. Other things you can do beforehand on setting this up is head to tiny.cc. This is a URL shortening service that allows you to edit your short URLs and where they aim to each time, and gives you some basic stats on them. We'll be using this in the configuration file later, so that way instead of changing our slideshow URL on the Raspberry Pi every event, we're able to go to a web portal, change it, save it, and it'll update on the fly for us as needed. There's this website here for Windows called Night. If you're on a Mac, there's a one called Mac Apps Installer. This lets you select softwares you would need. For the purposes of what we're doing today, you would want to have 7-zip or another compression utility. You're going to need to have Spotify if you're planning on sending that from your computer to the Raspberry Pi. Notepad++, that's going to be our text editor. This one is needed over Notepad or WordPad already on Windows, as it maintains the Linux formatting within the document. And we're going to be using Putty, which is an SSH terminal app. Also, my guide, I have links on how to do this through the command prompt or the terminal on your Windows machine or Mac. If there's anything else you see here that you would like to quickly install on your computer, you would hit that, click Get Your Night. It downloads a file. When you launch that, it's going to automatically install and each of those apps. I'm just going to give you a show of it here. So it's downloading, updating each of these apps on the fly, unless it's running, which in this case Notepad++ is running, or if it's already up to date, it skips it, but it doesn't install any extra toolbars or anything else. Okay. Once it's installed, you'll be able to do things like manage your printer on the Raspberry Pi. I have set up my RX1 HS, my DS40, and my Heidi P520L on this Raspberry Pi as part of testing. It's going to give you a dashboard that'll let you go through and see how your system's performing, what processes are running. These are all the bits of software running in the background on the Raspberry Pi. Services, these are like little apps that are running. A quick note, Avahi is the zero config or Bonjour service for your Raspberry Pi to be discovered on the network for Mac and PC systems. Ras Spotify we talk about later. That's our Spotify. Cups is the printer daemon. Cron is a task manager type thing for Linux system. Drop bears are SSH. These inactive ones are services that could be part of DiaPi. DiaPi dashboards that we're using right now. Ramlog is for logging. Preboot and postboot are services that help manage the preboot and postboot, etc. Also within here, we can go through and install other softwares onto the Raspberry Pi. All these packages are part of what makes DiaPi a little special. They're already pre-configured to install and work out of the box with little to no extra configuration steps. So it's pretty cool. Terminal. So if you're using your phone, a web browser, an iPad, a laptop, you can get into the terminal, which is the text-based interface for the Raspberry Pi right over the network. This does log in using the admin account or root account password on the system, which we'll touch on a little later. Management, this tells us what we're running. We could shut down the system and restart it. And a file browser. This would be handy if you needed to copy files onto the Raspberry Pi, especially if you're going to run a separate music server and need to upload some new tunes to it. Rufus is another tool we're going to be using on Windows. It's for creating bootable USB drives, the easy way. It says so right there. Or on a Mac, you can use Balena Etcher. I prefer Rufus. I use it for all sorts of IT things. So, back to what we're doing here. I have a guide up on my blog, the murphythings.wordpress.com. I'm going to go through these steps relatively in order and talk about each thing while bringing them up on screen to share with you. So I'm going to be turning off the Raspberry Pi right now, pulling its SD card, going into my SD card reader, and plugging into the computer, maybe. There we go. All right. Oh, I didn't like that. Let's try that again. Unplug it, plug it back in. All right, that seems to be happy that time. So now we're going to go into my desktop here. I'm going to start by launching the Rufus that I've already downloaded. Oh, there we go. Okay. Rufus is open. Make sure it's selected your SD card reader. In this case, I'm using a 64 gig SD card. We're doing boot selection, disk or ISO image, and then we're going to browse to our files that we've downloaded in preparation. When you download the Diet Pie image from the website, it'll be zipped. You'll need to extract it, and that's what 7-zip is used for. If you're not familiar with how to unzip files, check out a YouTube video on it. So we've got that selected, we've got our drive selected, everything else stays default. We're going to click Start. It's checking for any processes. All of our data will be destroyed. Key, multiple partitions. So multiple partitions on SD card means it's formatted to have one part of the SD card set aside for one type of data and another set of the SD card set aside for different data. We're just going to go with it. So it's running right now. While that's going, we're going to look back over the site. Things you'll need to have collected is the name of your wireless network, your wireless network password. You think about what you'd like to name the device. You should already have your TinyCC account set up with it linked to your Slideshow. And then, per my guide, we're going to go through a lot of these options once the SD card is written, which is almost done here. Yeah, right now the Raspberry Pi is off, so you'll see down in my corner here, that's the HDMI capture card waiting for input down there. Depending on the speed of your computer, SD card reader, writing that image could take anywhere from the minute I've been talking right now to more time depending on what you have going on. It says ready, we'll click close. Critical right now, do not take off the SD card. We're going to browse into the SD card here. And these are all the files. Don't touch anything in here. You're going to be opening Diet Pi Wi-Fi and entry 0 between those two marks there. You want to put in your wireless network name, and then you want to go down to the Wi-Fi key and put in your wireless network password. If you look at my blog, I talk about having event Wi-Fi. You would need to pre-program these. Now is best with your hotspots, or another way to do it is have a few predetermined wireless networks that you might use. Set those up in the file, and then change the settings on your various hotspots so they all have the same network name and password. Solve your equipment between events, locations, gears, rollouts, however you run your business works for you. We're going to save this file and close it out. And then there's dietpie.txt. You go through and read each of these options on what to change and what to not change. I'm going to go through and do some of that now. We're going to stick with standard English for our language. Our keyboard layout, no keyboard is connected, but we're going to go with US so everything works there. I am located in Denver, so we're going to go America/Denver. We're going to set this up to, actually we're going to keep it where we're using wired Ethernet for all of our initial setup. Later we're going to go ahead and enable the Wi-Fi. You'd want to change this to a 1 to have it auto set up your Wi-Fi. If you don't have an extra network cable port, whatever available to connect the Raspberry Pi directly to your router for internet access. So I'm going with 0 there. Most of you will want to do a 1. I am in the US, so I'm going to change this to US for, if I can type, my Wi-Fi. This DyePie.txt has links right in there and tells you everything it can as you're doing this. We are not going to use static because this can and will change depending on your setup. Unless you know what you're doing, then by all means go for it. Right here, convert DHCP least network settings in a static one. We're going to leave that alone too. If you want to change that, you could, so that we always have the same IP address as assigned, but again, that could conflict or change depending on your event Wi-Fi setup. DHCP, by the way, stands for Dynamic Host Configuration Protocol. It just means the network device goes, hey, I'm on your network. Can you hook me up with an IP address and other info? And then the router DHCP server goes, yeah, here you go, and gives it an address so it could talk on your local network. Host name. This is we're going to change what our system will show up on as the network. I'm going to use my website again, if I could type. And I'm using a Raspberry Pi 4 today, so I'm going to put Raspberry Pi 4. If you open or use my demonstration file, I set that up on my 3B before. We are not going to force our Ethernet speed, just let it be automatic. We do want to have this wait for network, so that way it's online and working. We are not worrying about options that I'm skipping over. If your setup is just a print server and don't plan on having any video out, you could disable it, and that'll free up RAM for the rest of the system to use. We're leaving the login daemon settings alone. Custom script, we do have a custom script, not a pre-script going. So we want to change this to nothing. It's going to be 0 because we have the file that we're going to copy to the boot of our drive in a little bit. We are not backing up or restoring. We are going to stick with drop bear for the SSH server. We are not going to worry about an SSH key. Logging size is fine. Okay, in these next options, you want to read through because we're going to be setting it up to use Chromium, which is what's the web browser that's going to be in kiosk mode to show our slideshow. So we change that to -2 per the directions there. Other options we're able to leave at default. DyePie auto start. These are your various options. We are going with 11. So we want this to start up as a Chromium kiosk. So startup target index. And that's going to be 11 for Chromium kiosk. And then we get set up our auto login username. We're going to stick with root. You can read through this and determine what you would want to do, if anything different. We're changing this to a 1 to indicate we are accepting the licensing, and it also is required for us to do the auto setup. I'm going to stick with the default password. You should change this to a password you're comfortable sharing with your attendants or people as needed. This next section is our software that's automatically going to be installed. We are going to be having it automatically install the DyePie monitor. Let me go to the settings on, this is the file from the one I've had available for download on my blog article. So again, we have it auto install the DyePie dashboard. We need to install Chromium in order to do the kiosk. Spotify is our music service for Spotify, and Cups is the print server. So I am copying and pasting this in here. The pound symbol, when it's in front of things like this, is called commenting it out. You remove the symbol, and that tells the setup programs to read that line for what to do with it. After I have it, I have, again, the hashtag here, and then I put notes in because that won't be read by the install script while it's running. And this is just notes for us to look at when we need to know what port to connect to for each of the services and what we're installing. Okay, we are going to opt out of the Diet Pie survey. That's a 0. I would not mess with any of these settings related to your CPU throttle and things. If you're doing this on an Intel system, it gives you options for turbo and your graphics drivers. We are not modifying these settings here. And everything I'm skipping is default settings that we should be fine with. Check daily for Diet Pie updates. We're going to put 0 because once you set this up, you want to be able to set it and forget it. Same thing here. We're going to disable APT package updates. That's a repository or software source for all the little programs running on the Raspberry Pi. Network time, it could check at boot and daily to keep the time in sync. Again, that's set up for me for America Denver to keep my time in sync. We do not need the serial console, so we're going to disable that. Do not worry about the sound card settings here. We'll change those later. LCD panel, this is going to be set up to connect to an HDMI panel. This is if you're using one of the Raspberry Pi specific LCD panels. Leave IPv6 alone. We're going to leave the APT mirrors alone, the NTP servers alone. Okay, then we need to go down in here. Don't touch anything with the Wi-Fi in this file. And for Chromium, I'm using a 1080p display, so we need to change that to 1980 by 1080, no, 1920 by 1080. And then our auto start URL, we're going to go to tinycc, and we're going to get our URL here. For my demo, we're going to plug that in as the URL that the kiosk goes to, just like so. You could read through the rest. All the rest of these settings are at default. And then we go to save and close that out. Next thing you're going to need to open, this one should be done in Notepad++. If you want to make any changes or look it over, this is the automation custom script. You could open up to look at what's in there to make sure I'm not installing something crazy on your system or whatever. I don't know, up to you. Anyhow, this is set up to use the bash shell. That's just the command prompt of preference for the script to run. It's going to install the Guten print drivers. That's the drivers for all the Dye Sub printers, and this is in addition to cups. Then unclutter that installs, and it sets it to idle and hide the mouse cursor after half a second for the Chromium. And then this should go through and re-enable our Wi-Fi. It doesn't always seem to work, so we're going to have that be something we go over after the initial setup. And then when it's all done, it's going to reboot the Raspberry Pi. Okay, so I'm closing that out. I'm going to go to my files. We're going to copy this one and paste it right into the root of the boot drive area. There it is. Again, there's our Diet Pi text with the Wi-Fi already configured that we did a moment ago. and dietpie.txt that has our keyboard layout and all of the other settings that we've changed along the way already on there. That's everything you need to do on the SD card. We're going to eject it. It's safe to. I am plugging it into the Raspberry Pi and powering on the Raspberry Pi. Now we're switching back, and it's going to do all the first boot setup stuff. So if you watch the screen, you can kind of see what's going on. It's doing things like expanding to use the entire SD card space. It's making sure it's online. It's connecting to our network or Wi-Fi, obtaining an IP address. Then it's going to start doing any updates to DietPi for the initial setup, as well as check to make sure all of its sources are up to date for installing all the extra programs. See, there it goes. Checking the time and booting up. And you kind of keep track of that as it goes. While that's happening, you're going to want to go and log in to your router. In this case, I have an Amplify Alien. I'm going to my system info, go through and look through my devices, and what I'm looking to locate is my Raspberry Pi, and it'll have that host name that we set earlier. Let me refresh it, and like that. Let's try it again. Oh, come on. There we go. So that's the host name that we set right there. And this is the IP address that this is gained off of my network. If you don't know how to find what devices are connected to your network and what their IP addresses are, go to Google, plug in the make and model of your home router with the words connected devices, DHCP list, etc. And I can do on mine is if I click here, I'm able to tell it okay there, and it'll set the IP address of that. I'm keeping it automatic for my means today. And let's go back to check on our install process. So it's currently installing x.org. That's a graphical user interface for Chromium to run on top of for the slideshow. I'm on rather fast internet. If you ever need to test how fast your internet is, I suggest going to fast.com. It's a service provided by Netflix, and it lets you test how fast your download speed is. And when it finishes testing that, which right now my Raspberry Pi is pulling down files from somewhere, so it might be a little slower. Then I click show more info. It's going to show me my latency and my upload speeds also. This is good to know when you're at events, because upload is what you're dependent on for sending your files from your photo booth to your cloud service. And if you're uploading videos, those use more space, more time, and are slower to transfer than just pictures. There's all sorts of good solutions out there. So back to my blog article, you can see the settings that we've changed notated here and the custom script. You could find your Pi's IP address in my device here. It is now booting. And once it's all done, it'll restart automatically and should show your slideshow. It's still going in the background for me. So while that's going, you could be installing those other programs if you haven't started that already. Getting a cup of coffee, chilling out, things like that. It's now, as I look over here, installing the Avahi daemon. That's the broadcaster for the network for it to show that it's there and available. It's installed the DiePi dashboard. Now it's also installing Chromium, which is the open source software that's running behind the scenes for Google Chrome and many other web browsers. This also automatically installs things for the audio, the desktop, the network, the packages, and the way DiePi works. Pretty amazing for a Linux package, because most of the time it just works. I've been using it at home for a couple years now to run a Pi-hole server, which blocks ads on my network by not letting my computer connect to known servers that supply ads, spam, things like that. I've had that running for 2 years off an original Raspberry Pi Model B, and since I'm using DiePi and only running that, we'll also run a Spotify endpoint on it. It does pretty well. Lets me play the music to a nicer set of speakers. If you check out the DiePi website, because this is still going, we go back and see right now it's installing things related to Chromium being in there. You can check out various features, so it talks about how it's optimized. You could compare it to other operating systems. Talks about a simple interface. We'll be seeing this later. It's a command line text-based user interface. Plenty of good tools. So if you want to dive a little deeper, check that out more. I didn't go with using the Raspberry Pi OS because that would get a lot more technical for what we're trying to accomplish to keep things simple. Closing out things I no longer need. These pages are loaded in static, but because I just reset the Raspberry Pi that was set up, I can hit refresh and they won't load up, but we're going to keep them open for what we're doing with the guide here. Oh, it's now installing Spotify, the Spotify Connect client. That does require Spotify Premium. So let's go full screen and check that out. All right, now it's on the steps of finalizing the install. This is where it enables everything it just installed. And then it's going to run that custom script that we put on there, where it'll go through and install the Guten print drivers for our printers. And it's also right now updating the EEPROM on the Raspberry Pi. That's the base system software. Then it's also going to install Unclutter, which helps hide our mouse while it's running. So this is about to restart. And when it does, we'll see another wall of text. And then it's going to load into my slideshow. Already connected to the Raspberry Pi here is a DNP DS40. This should work for most major Dye Sub printers as well. It just set our extra settings and restarted. And I see a mouse cursor there, so the unclutter did not run properly, and Print may not have installed properly either. So to troubleshoot that, we go in and let's open our automation custom script file. We're going to start off by copying this line here. We're going to go to our putty, close that. Okay, so we need to get putty back open here. That's from earlier. And we go back to our router to check the IP address. Oops. Of the Raspberry Pi. So copy that. Okay, we're going to go here in putty. I'm just going to paste it into the box because we're logging in through a basic putty session for SSH on port 22. We're going to accept our fingerprint identity. We're going to log in as root with the password of diet pie. Back to the file. You can right click and go to copy, or you can press Control C. But in putty, you right click to paste and then hit enter, and this is going to manually install the packages. For whatever reason, the file didn't write properly, so it may not have installed. In this right here, apt-get is we're getting the files from apt. We're going to install, we're going to accept all the settings, the printer driver Print. I'm going to go ahead and copy the next line, which is going to install unclutter and add it to our things. So there it is. That is already installed. Now we're doing unclutter. Because again, I know this didn't happen because I could see the mouse pointer in the middle of the screen. Now it's installed unclutter. We're going to also make sure our Wi-Fi is enabled. That's going to go through, and yep, it is now enabled and completed. And we're going to type in sudo, which just forces it to run the reboot command. And it closed the network connection because it is now restarting. So if something doesn't work, there's always a way to fix it. There's the wall of text as our system boots up. And if you're running a Diet Pi 3, that whole boot up might take about 30 seconds longer than it did. It's not that bad, all things considered. And now if you look, no mouse cursor in the middle. It's loading my slideshow from PhotoShare as I use DSLR booth. If you go back into our dietpie.txt file from earlier, because you have a other way of wanting to do your slideshow, that URL that we changed, let's say you're running darkroom booth through booth control, there's a slideshow, but it's ran on your local network. So your darkroom booth photo booth computer, you would also want to have it either be assigned a static IP through DHCP or on the system itself. And what you would do there is then change this URL here to the IP address /slideshow of your darkroom booth computer. And again, if you have multiple booths and systems out there and all of that, you could set up all your Wi-Fi equipment to have the same IP addresses, network names, passwords, etc. So that way your experience for your attendance and yourself and troubleshooting is consistent between all of your sites. If you have multiple booths out, all with internet access or Wi-Fi, because If you are using Darkroom Booth Slideshow, you don't need internet. You only need the network. And Wi-Fi does not always mean internet. And you have internet without having Wi-Fi. All right, back to our system. We're going to restart our session. I right-clicked up on the top here. Restart session. Log back in as root. Password DietPi. And then if you read through this, we are going to go into the DietPi config, which I could highlight it this way. Great. Right-click here. And that opens it. We're going to go into audio options. And for sound card, instead of auto, we are going to use the HDMI output, as I'm using a monitor with speakers built in. You can set to 3.5. You're planning on having it go out as a normal stereo, like headphone jack, into an amplified speaker system, feeding into the DJ system, what have you. And again, it depends on your setup. If you leave that auto, it should default to HDMI if plugged in. If not, it'll go to 3.5. I find it's more stable to tell it what you want for your setup. So I'm using the up and down arrow keys and enter to select. Now that that is set, we're going to go back. We're going to go into our network options, and we're going to make sure both Ethernet and Wi-Fi are on. So we have to enable Wi-Fi. Yes. Or OK to enable Wi-Fi. All this text scrolling right now is the DietPi going through and turning on the Wi-Fi module, attempting to connect, getting an IP address, all that jazz. And it has worked. Now I'm pressing down or tab to get to OK, right arrow key to select back, enter, back, enter. Also in here under things like auto start options, you can see Chromium is what's set for the auto start. If we click enter there, we could change our shortened URL as needed. I'm not changing that today. We're not changing our current choice for default login. We're just going to cancel those things out. We're going to select exit and exit. Again, that's all using the up, down, left, right arrows. And we do want now. And it's going to close our connection. And the system is restarting. Should come back up in a moment with our wall of text. As it comes up, again, with all this, your mileage may vary. I am not responsible or liable for any issues you have in what you do with this information. You should have a backup of a backup and all the extra cables needed in case something doesn't work in the field for you. So our slideshow is loading. Again, no cursors, so I know unclutter worked. We could restart our session and log back into the Raspberry Pi. So that's loaded. I'm going to refresh this page. For its first connection, it's going to come up with an error that your connection is not private. So we are at the IP address of the Raspberry Pi, then :631. Don't worry about putting printers. This will come up. You'll need to click advanced and proceed. That just means you're accepting an unsigned certificate for security from the DHCP server. Printers are not set up. We go to administration, click add printer. It might come up with an error right there. Just let it sit a moment. You'll be okay. Here's our local printers. It's finding printers on my network I have here as well. Other network printer options, what we're looking for, the Dye Nippon Printing DS40 or whatever printer you have connected. Look for it in the list. Click the radio button. Continue. You want to share this printer, you could change its name to just be DS40 for the name and for the description. So it's something different. We'll put DNP-DS40. Not worrying about the location. Share it. Here's our connection through Gutenprint. Click continue. And then we select its driver in the driver list or PPD file. We don't have those. We just select add printer. And then we're going to go set printer options. Right now I'm going to set to 4x6, and we want to expand and use the maximum page area. Set our default options. We could click on this to go in and see that. We can click back on administration. Let's say you also want to cut prints. You're going to add the printer again, but this time we're going to do it to set it up for photo strips. And so I'm going to name this one 2x6 and 26 DS40. Share it, continue. Select the model there, add printer, set printer options. I need to go in here, 2x6 times 2. Expand, set, and now if I go and click printers, it shows up as two different printers, even though it's the one same printer. And then if I go into Windows, settings, let me bring that over here to show you all. Going to go into our Bluetooth and devices, printers and scanners, add a device, and you can see it here. It's seeing old ones being broadcast. Refresh again. Alright, so there's our 2x6 cut DS40. I could add that. Because I had the old print server up earlier, and a value running Windows is going, oh, you had these printers on your network, even though they're not actually there anymore. This will say connecting for a while it's adding it. I'm going to go in and remove this other old printer. And did that just mess me up? Nope. There, now that's added. If I hit print test page, you should hear it ka-chugga in the background while it's printing. And I got my cut in half printed test paper. I don't got a camera to show you all because my home lab area is a mess. Okay, go back to printers and scanners, add device, should be able to refresh. If it's not showing up, we can add it by IP address. It is an Internet Printing Protocol device. Get our IP address here. Again, this is going to change on my network. Normally I would assign an IP through my router, but this is just for now. It's going to contact that. I didn't like that. All right. Oh, let's see here. Let Windows help find the slightly older printer. Let's see what happens. No, we cancel that. Show it back here. Now, on my guide, I do have a link to printing. You can watch this video on how to add the printer for your devices. Okay. Then we also have our DiePi dashboard. That is running, so let's see how the system is doing on the network. And if we go in here, I can start playing some music to myself. And then here's our RAS Spotify player. Oh. Spotify is going to find and connect to it. And just takes a moment. And now the music is playing through the HD TV that has my output. I've done similar setups where I use the television's out of venue to send my slideshow and audio to as well. So those things would work for you. I am going to mute the audio from the thing before I get a copyright notice here, you know. So we have now gone through and set up and done the music, slideshow, printing, dashboard. Now you could go through and check out the various options on DiePi's software list. These ones with MPD in the name, or MOPD, again MPD is part of the thing, are good options for setting up your own music player that runs on the Raspberry Pi, so you don't need internet for Spotify to run and do that. And you could have your own playlist set up and music that, again, you copy to the SD card, or you go through the file browser of the interface and add a new directory, upload files from your local computer, etc. And if you're looking for generic music for your 360s, for your boomerangs, etc., Pixabay is where I go to get images for all my inspiration for my templates and things. But they also do royalty-free music. That's legit. So you can add all your printers, you add them again with the cuts, and they show up and work easier off Android and iPad than what we did here. And that's the full setup on how to turn your system into a slideshow music server and do some printing in there as well. Save you some money compared to those pre-made print servers out there, or you can always get a cheap Windows laptop and make it work using that. Hope you all enjoyed the video. Have a good night.